Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try to do a song. It's really sort of like a memory, but it's a true story. You know, I've been around this old world for a few years, and I should do more of this for the kids. Maybe they'd appreciate it. I don't know if they would or not. Well, this is the story. Well, you know, I was sitting there one night. My wife was getting ready to have a little baby boy. We were 25 miles out in the country, and that snow was starting to come down. Well, my wife, I said, honey, you ready to go and over to the hospital and see that doctor man? She said, honey, I think I'll wait a little while. So I walked around a little bit and looked out again, and it seemed like it was getting a little bit worse. I said, honey, we better get going. So we grabbed the bags, and I had a little 65 Mustang automobile. We all jumped in there and took off. When I was riding over to see that doctor in the hospital, I knew I had 25 miles to go. Well, I'd seen a lot of snow in my time, because up in Labrador at the Air Force for a year in 1955. Well, I didn't know it at the time. We was getting ready to have the worst storm, they say, in 50, 60 years. It was the storm of 1966, when my little baby boy, Glen, was born. Well, that little Mustang car was doing all right. We was plugging on down the road. Had another 10 miles to go, and the road was getting a little slippery, but everything's still all right. I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and she said, honey, I'm all right. Pulled into that big old hospital, spun around there and got us up to the door. And nurse come and met us. Back in them days they did. Took her to the room, and I parked the car. Well, I grabbed Shirley's bags and took them through that door. That daggone snow was really coming down. We got up to the room, and she all settled in, and I was waiting in the waiting room. It seemed like a million years, but finally that doctor come through them doors. He said, Mr. Phillips, you got a beautiful little baby boy. Well, I just swallowed a couple times, and I felt like I was in heaven. Knowing everything was all right, I said, well, how's my wife? He said, come on in. Took me in, and Shirley was holding that little baby. I felt real good. Everything seemed to be fine. Well, I kissed my wife and my little boy and went back out and waited to get everything straightened up. I walked to the door, and that snow was falling. I mean, like blowing, and that snow was falling. To the door, and that snow was falling. I mean, like blowing a 30-mile-an-hour wind. I could see in the parking lot my little old 65 Mustang sitting there. And that snow had already drifted up around her hubcaps. She had them spinners on her them days. So, Shirley, she said, when I went back in, she said, honey, you better get on home. I said, well, that's all right, I'll wait. You sure you're fine? She said, I'm fine, and everything's fine. I said, well, I'll wait a little while longer, and then I better get on the road. Well, I'll tell you what. Kissed my wife again, little boy. Walked down there and got in that little Mustang car. I spun out of that yard like I never spun before. Had 25 miles to go. And that snow was sure as hell falling down fast than I ever seen it. And I've been around a time or two and seen some snow. But I mean, it was coming. Well, you know, about 1 or 2 in the morning, there wasn't another soul out on that road. Nowhere. Now, the light, you couldn't see nothing. I think the power was going out some places. Well, I got down there about 20 miles and I had to turn off on a secondary road and got back in there. And that little Mustang had hit a big old drift in the road. I was just following the poles, the big old telephone pole lines, because I couldn't tell where the road was. Trying to keep her in the middle. Hit an big old drift and bust on through. Say, daggone, made that one. I think I'll be all right now. Well, you know, I turned in this little side road, back road where I live. And by golly, there's a lot of trees down there. And all of a sudden, I seen this drift in front of me. I couldn't believe it. In them woods, it must have been 5 foot tall. Well, I might have stretched it. She might have been maybe 3.5, 4. But I hit that Mustang as hard as I could, and I thought I just about broke through. But that Mustang would look like a rearing horse, because she'd push that snow right up underneath of her. We were just sitting there. That Mustang wasn't going nowhere. Well, I jumped on out. Started to walk. I know Mr. Russell McCabe and Miss Peggy was not too far down the road. Had a little house. I said, if I just get on up there, he can get his old tractor and pull me on out. Well, you know, I started walking. I was a young man. He can get his old tractor and pull me on out. Well, you know, I started walking. I was a young man, and I thought I was healthy, too. Out of them drifts, after about 100 of them steps, you feel like you're an old man. When we were up in Goose Bay, Labrador in the Air Force, us boys, we done it all together, and the roads were sort of plowed. But I'll tell you what was worse right there that night down Campbelltown than anything I've seen in Goose Bay. Well, finally I got to Peggy's doing Russell McCabe's door and knocked and banged. And old Russell come to the door and said, Bob, what are you doing out here tonight like this? I said, Russ, I got my car stuck and Shirley's in the hospital having a little baby boy. And he said, well, congratulations, that's good. He said, come on in here and get warmed up, boy. Well, I walked in the door and Peggy got me some coffee and I think she gave me a piece of cake, cookies, I don't know what it was. And it sure did taste good. I felt like I was home. They were wonderful people, and I only had a little ways to go. Old Russ said, Bob, we'll get that old Ralph Chalmers tractor, and we'll pull you right on out and take you on down your corner where you live. So I said, okay, Russ, I don't know if she's going to do it. He said, oh, we'll get her. Well, he put on a great big overcoat, I'll never forget it. I think it was Second World War, it looked like. He's a big man, but that daggone coat went clear down to his ankle, pretty near. And old Peggy said, good luck, Bob. So me and Russell got on the old AC tractor. She had that tricycle gear in front and the little wheels in the middle, 2 big ones in the back. Well, we got on down there in that snow. And I mean, it was blowing cold, and I mean, it was drifting high. Russell said, Bob, he said, you see if you can get in there. And when I get her tightened up, he said, maybe we can bust her on through. Well, I got that little old 289 cranked up, and I mean, I was spinning them tires like a bat out of hell. And old Russell put that AC tractor in gear, and I thought we might just possibly do it. But you know what? That Mustang looked like a Bronco, rearing up on his hind feet. She'd pushed that snow up underneath that front of her, and she wasn't going nowhere. Old Russell finally hollered back, and I mean, it was cold, and wind was blowing and howling. He said, Bobby, he said, we better get on up to the house. He said, she ain't going to come out here tonight. I said, I don't think so either, Russ. So we jumped in that truck. And I thanked the boy. He said, don't worry about it, Bob. You done me a million favors. And, well, Russ and me was fishing Aztec Island down there in Ocean City, Maryland. Well, I'm home. Hot damn, boy. Old Russell, he puttered on down the road in that tractor. And that snow and the wind, it was howling and wind and blowing, and I never seen nothing like it. Worse than Montana. We was feeding cattle out in them haystacks in the wintertime, Pop and Tom and all his kids, and by God, it got cold out there too. Well, I went in the house, I said, I'll call Shirley. See how my wife's doing. Got a little new baby boy. Picked up the phone. He was dead in the doornail. There wasn't no phone service there. I guess them old power done blowed over, I don't know. But we didn't have no telephone, that's for sure. Just about that time, the lights went out. They started blinking, and all of a sudden, boom, it was dark on a double in that big old house. Well, I'd taken all the children over to my brother Harlan's and ours, and they were taking care of them until Shirley got home with the baby. Well, I was there in that old house, and I'm going to tell you what, most times the kids running every which way but loose, and it was very quiet, very dark. Well, I had an old kerosene lamp when I was in the insurance business. I got it from an old black man. And I lit that sucker up, and it was just the nicest thing in the world. And that's all you really need, just a little old light, you know. If you want to go in and get something to drink or whatever. Well, first thing you know, I curled up in my bed upstairs, and boy, it seemed lonely up there. Man, it was lonely. First thing I know, I looked out, and it was starting to get late. I jumped out of bed, put on my clothes, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Down the corner crossroad, it must have been 4 foot of snow. And I'm talking about on the level. That whole little valley there was just filled right full of snow. Nothing was moving. Everything was quiet, crystal clear white. Well, it was the greatest storm they'd had in 50 or 60 years. It was a storm of 66. And you know, I just thought of something. Old Mr. Russell McCabe, he said, Bob, he said, we're going to have to name that little baby boy Snowstorm. I said, that's a good name for a little rascal. So that's how Glen Phillips got his name, Snowstorm, by Russ McCabe. McCabe. Well, I'm sitting there, second day. Nothing's still moving. Can't call my wife. No cars, no trucks, no anything. Finally, late that afternoon, this old young black gentleman lived down the road, I'd known a long time, he's plugging it through. He hollered, Mr. Phillips, he said, I'm going up to Carl Baker's store. Do you need anything? I said, well, I'd like to have a pack of cigarettes. Better get me 2. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. And I sure appreciate it. I think he was, I can't think of that man's name right now, and that's the darn shame. He wasn't a bright ale. But it don't matter, he's a good man. Well, he plugged on out. Later on, he brought him back. Well, the third day, I went to bed that night, a lonely old house, no lights, no telephone, no nothing. I had plenty of stuff to eat in that old house. But anyhow, the third day, I looked out, about 1 o'clock, here come this here noise, you hadn't heard nothing, so... Really? I think I screwed this thing up. With that plow. He just waved back at me and kept right on and going. Well, you know what? I'd stepped on out the door, and I slammed it because the wind was still blowing and howling. And you know that door locked right up behind me, and I was there in my, nothing on but a pair of skivvies. and a t-shirt and barefooted to boot. And it was cold in Hades. Something like that. I ended up busting that door in, get back in that nice warm house. And folks, that's the story of the storm of 1966. And a little boy named Glen that Mr. Russell McCabe for eternity named Snowstorm. Well, you know, I'm sitting here still wondering why I done that there thing about Glen. The truth of the matter is, I see Bobby Davis, or Mike Davis rather, from Campbelltown, and over at church supper, and he's cooking chicken and oysters, all that stuff. Brought back memories when we were over at Campbelltown. He was a little boy running around with Bill and Butch and all them, Terry and Kathy. And then I come home and got a phone call that Glen had cut his finger making a duck blind, and somehow it all come together, and I decided to write that song. But some of these other songs I'm going to mess around here. I'm really not doing a good job, but I'll plunk around with some guitars and sing sort of off-the-wall kind of stuff that it's not good, but it's really my first attempt on this machine. So that's my excuse. You have a good... That ring of fire